Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK. It's been a long time no see. I am still alive, and I'm still doing well. If you are a follower of my channel, you know that I've been helping my dad and my uncle start up a business, a little woodworking shop, essentially. And it's just been occupying a lot of my time, so I haven't really been on my regular programming. In fact, I don't think I've even recorded a single video in over a week. So guess what? I think it's time to get back on the grind, check up on the market. I'm doing well, Bitcoin, not so much, but we'll discuss that in today's video. And as always, if you guys are enjoying the content, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Alright, so to start out, we are on the daily Bitcoin CME futures chart. We're going to start on that one just because today's video is going to be very much a plan A, plan B type of a video, where we're just going to look at what Bitcoin's doing kind of in the short term, what we expect, kind of in the midterm, and what to look out for as far as levels go. And in order to put this puzzle, the pieces of this puzzle together to have an idea of what to expect over the coming days, we have to start with CME futures. So CME futures trades essentially Sunday evening through Friday evening. Depending on the time zone that you're in, of course, that will vary as far as the time goes, but it's like 6 p.m. Sunday to 6 p.m. Friday night, right? At least where I'm from. And so it closed on Friday at the closing price of $19,575. And so if we were to open, or whatever if we were to open here in a few hours, it is Sunday where I'm at, about 10:30 a.m. here, so we've got another 8 hours or so until CME opens to begin trading again for this next week. Anything above that would just create a small gap. Now, in my opinion, I don't expect any significant move one way or the other to happen until markets open tomorrow. We're going to discuss briefly the SPX in a second and the E-mini futures and kind of what those charts look like. But sideways price action for now makes the most sense to me. Market's very uncertain with what's been going on with the economy. There is, I believe, FOMC meeting this coming Wednesday, which of course is going to have everybody on edge. What's the next rate hike going to be, and so forth, right? And so in the short term, sideways just makes sense to me, especially with the closure of the CME on Friday being so close to where current price action is. In fact, if we hop over to another chart that just shows, Bitcoin's current price action, this is the FTX exchange chart for the Bitcoin. We're on the 4-hour here. You can see that price action's at 19,721. So, they're very, very close. That's only about $150, which is, nothing, right? In the grand scheme of things. So what I would expect in the short term would be Bitcoin just to continue to range until this evening. And if there is going to be any sort of a move one way or the other, it most likely doesn't happen until the markets open tomorrow anyway. But, if it was to begin to happen, as moves tend to like to do in the middle of the night while everyone's sleeping, at least here in the United States, they like to catch us off guard while we're sleeping. If there was to be a move, it would likely happen at the opening of markets tomorrow, or, in my luck, would be while we're sleeping. Now, what do I expect in the short term? Well, probably a bounce. A small bounce would make sense. If we go back over here to the current price action, we've discussed this on the channel for the last few months, really, but back here in June, we had this long ascending, channel that went to the upside, broke down, and then it was in a little bear flag, broke down. And we were recently discussing this descending triangle that price action was in from like late August till end of the first week in September. We discussed on the channel that the likelihood of it breaking down was higher, of course, than breaking up. And the first measured move that it had for that pattern, it didn't quite reach, in my opinion. This is the more conservative, actually, right here, and I do believe it hit that measured move. The conservative measured move, which is why I had this green box, it did hit almost on the button, or the dot, or whatever you want to say. And, I was expecting more downside. I was very upfront about that. We had a short signal on the daily Ichimoku cloud, which was before all this breakdown. So it wasn't that the signal was wrong. It played out to the tune of basically about a 5% move, which I know isn't a whole lot, but You know, for Bitcoin these days, I guess that is a pretty good sized move. And then we had a big bear trap, essentially, right? This is while I wasn't making videos because I was helping my dad and my uncle, like I said at the beginning. But you had that little move where this became a bear trap and price action pumped to the upside, right? Well, then on the flip side of that, it met this daily resistance zone at about 22,400, and it peaked its head above it, went all the way to almost 23K, about 23,800, and then had a bull trap on the other end of that, right? And boom, price action plunges for about 12.5%, that's a lot more significant move. And then that kind of leads us to where we are now, which is essentially boring price action for the last few days, right? Ever since around the 13th, which has been about 5 days ago, it's just been consolidating, and you could call this kind of a small falling wedge. 68% chance breaks to the upside. It did, but not really with any sort of volume, and it just met resistance at around 20,200. Rejections. That's just kind of where we're at right now. And more or less, we're just consolidating, which is to be expected after a big move. Price action never moves one way, without having some sort of a corrective wave the other way, just like what happened here, where you plunged down and then you had a corrective wave, much bigger than most people expected, but to the upside. Now we've plunged to the downside. You would expect a little bit of a corrective wave, in my opinion, to the upside. So what would an upside move at this point potentially look like? Well, to me, it would just be to retest some previous resistance slash support. In this case, resistance, right? Anything above us at right now would be resistance. So the breakout measured move of this small descending channel, I guess you could say, really was not much. It was up here at around 20,500, which to me would make sense. That's also in confluence with this area back here that's been resistance on 3 different occasions. The top side of that, you could say, was the support for this bear flag. Support. So you could basically draw this as a little bit of a zone. If you're a follower of my channel or have been for some time, you know that I consider support and resistances to be a zone. They're not an exact level. Often price action will bounce on the bottom side or top side of the zone and so forth. So I look at this area to be where I would be targeting any potential rejections at, right? And just a lower high. So at this point, we have ourselves this high, which, depending on how you look at it, is a higher high than back here. But if you look at more of this kind of situation as being kind of a little wedge that we broke out of, here was the last high, here is the low. This isn't confirmed yet, but you could look at this move here as just a lower high, than this high back here. So in the short term, sure, this is a higher low than here, but what you would expect if this the higher time frame trend is to continue would ultimately be a lower low down here somewhere, right? Which is what I had been speaking about ever since the breakdown of really this rising channel. And definitely since the breakdown of this most recent descending triangle. Now, I wasn't expecting this corrective wave to be so forceful, but I guess in the grand scheme of things, we really should have, because at the end of the day, if we were to take the Fibonacci retracement and go from that top to this bottom here, that was the golden pocket. The 0.618 to 0.65, if you can see right here on the Fibonacci retracement tool, that was what is considered, the average. Well, 0.5 is probably the most common, but it's not uncommon at all. It happens quite frequently to see a bounce back to the golden pocket. So that's what we got. At this point, you would expect ultimately this next downside wave from about 22,800 to put in a lower low. And this is what we were speaking about, that towards the end of September, I was expecting Bitcoin to find ultimately new lows, or at the very least, retest the 17,500. That was the low on spot price, right? So in the short term, what I'll be looking out for is a retest or another lower high of this zone here between about 20,500 on the lower side of it, as high as 20,000, maybe 850. And if you're looking for just a, wave within the wave, if we just take this same tool, let's go ahead and, oops, that's not what I meant to do. Let's go ahead and delete this Fibonacci retracement here, and let's look at if you just take from this most recent swing high at 22,850 down to this swing low, what would be the max pump that we could expect, in my opinion, before rolling over further? It would be the golden pocket of that swing, which has confluence. Hard to see here on my chart, apologize. But it's basically between around 21,500 and 21,600. There is confluence with that being resistance back in this area as well. So if we get a little bit bigger move to start the week, let's just say Monday, Tuesday, which could be in some confluence with a potential small bounce on the traditional SPX or even, the S&P 500, sorry, which I'll show you in just a second. This is where I would be targeting to be kind of the short-term top, right? And honestly, probably even before that, somewhere down here in that zone I talked about, or maybe as high as just testing 21K, which is going to be the 0.5. So somewhere in here is where I'd expect, but if you see a little bit of a break of here, I wouldn't get too excited unless we flip that as support. If we break back above like 21,600, then at that point it wouldn't surprise me if we at least run back up here to this high here, which is around 22,800, and maybe even from there begin to pump higher. And that'll be something I'll update you in tomorrow's video, or well, most likely over the next couple of days, if and when that were to happen. But in the short term, a bounce to the upside would make sense to me after we've had this, giant move to the downside. We've been consolidating sideways for a bit, and a move to the upside could make, some sense. So be looking for those areas. Specifically, if you want to write these down, again, between about 20,500 to 20,850-ish in the short term. If it were to break above that, look for a test of the Fibonacci golden pocket up here about 21,450 to about 21,600. And then just to finish out, to add some possible confluence to what we've been speaking about with Bitcoin, this is the SPX or the S&P 500 4-hour chart. And I haven't made a video, like I said, in like a week. And so the last time we actually spoke about this chart, we were discussing the rejection levels from when the SPX went up to about 4,300. Now, obviously, the most recent videos I'd made, it already had retraced quite a bit, but we'd been targeting this green box down here, right? And I think that that's still in play as far as the overall downside. But as we approach the top of it, you can see we've had this little kind of waves like this. Another little one to the upside, wouldn't surprise me before ultimately we do tap this box. And I would expect us to tap the bottom side of it over the next week or two. But in the short term, is there room for a bounce to be in confluence with Bitcoin? Yes, there is. We are nearing support. We're not quite at it, in my opinion. The true top of the support to me is at about 3,800 even. We tapped about 3,830 before we had a little bounce when we closed on Friday. We'll open up again tomorrow. We're not at support, but we're close enough to support that over the next day or two, a little move to the upside to possibly retest like 3,900, maybe even as high as like 39, maybe even almost as high as 4,000. It would be in the cards to me. And if that were to happen, that would be the catalyst to bring Bitcoin up to those numbers we were speaking about before, in my opinion, ultimately rolling over. So that's what I would be watching out for. Would be for the SPX to do something like this, even if it has a super short-term bounce to open, or pullback to open tomorrow, to tap that support. What I would expect ultimately over the next couple of days, as Bitcoin kind of works out these lower time frame bounce ideas, would be in confluence with the SPX to come back up here to like 3,900, maybe as high as close to or just under 4,000, and then to ultimately roll over, and then we would revisit at that point looking for bigger ideas for bounces, right? As it would just essentially finish out this falling wedge, which over time has a 68% chance of breaking to the upside. So that's what we'll be looking out for. It's just not something that I expect to happen, especially with that FOMC meeting coming out. And I don't imagine that's going to be super bullish. It doesn't seem like many of these Fed things recently have been, really, especially if you just back test the last 3 or 4. We've had, some okay moves on the other side of them, but for the most part, downside continuation has ultimately what's been played out. So if you ask me what I would expect to happen over the next few days, maybe a bounce in the short term, bring Bitcoin back up to possibly as high as 21K, maybe even a little bit higher, before ultimately rolling over. What we would be looking for the downside targets after that? Well, kind of depends on how high the bounce is, but what I'm still expecting over the next week or so would be that we revisit at the very least the lows of the bottom side of this box again, which would be back down around 18,500. Probably consolidate a bit there. We'll revisit it at that point. kind of see what's going on with the markets, what's going on with the S&P 500 and so forth. But ultimately, if that were to fail, then I would expect us to retest, finally, something I've been expecting for some time, the spot lows back here from mid-June at about 17,600. So I'll keep you guys posted in my upcoming videos this week. I appreciate you guys so much for sticking around, and as always, on your way out, please remember to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. And until next time, have a good day. It's